born. Can't you hear the captain shout? It's time to blow your horn.
For as long as there have been railroads, there have been difficult tasks and obstacles for trains to overcome. Hills and mountains, rivers and lakes. Bridges and tunnels were built to conquer them, and sometimes bigger engines were needed to make it up steep slopes. Some engines had a single set of driving wheels, while others had two. But long ago, there was also a kind of locomotive that had three. As such, these engines were known as triplexes. When they first arrived on their railroad, the board was impressed. "They'll be the strongest engines in the world," they said. "Nothing will be able to stop them." Their names were Matthew, Harold, and Stephen. They were immediately given trials to demonstrate their usefulness. First, Matthew was coupled up to a train of heavy coal cars. He gave a determined whistle, then started to pull. The cars began to follow him one by one, yelping and whining that he was pulling too hard. Matthew laughed and took no notice. But then, there were several loud snaps. The couplings had broken. The triplexes were too strong to pull trains, so the board decided they would be more useful pushing trains up hills. Harold was the first to try. Like Matthew, he started off well. That is, until the front engine began to complain that he was going too slow. Harold was weary. 3 sets of wheels made him very strong, but needed a lot of steam to turn. If he went any faster, he might run out. But with the front engine still hollering, he began to speed up. They had almost reached the top when the big engine began to feel short of breath. They made it over, but he was left exhausted. The others now laughed at him too, and began to call him Huff. Stephen did not have much luck either. Because he traveled slowly to prevent running out of steam, the impatient smaller engines began to call him Slug. When they were in the yard, the others would say, "Look, there's Matthew, Huff, and Slug, the clumsiest, slowest, and huffiest engines on the railroad." This upset the 3 big engines, but they wouldn't give up so easily. One day, Slug was sent to push a train. The front engine, whose name was Daniel, was young and waited impatiently for him. When Slug was finally coupled on, he wheeshed, "Finally!" and started off. As they began to climb, Daniel got a naughty idea. He stopped puffing so Slug would have to do all the work. Slug felt the train getting heavier and wanted to push harder, but knew he'd run out of steam if he did, so he struggled slowly forward. Daniel laughed, but soon became more annoyed when Slug couldn't push anymore. The train ground to a halt. Daniel was about to say how useless Slug was when they started moving again, in the wrong direction. They were slipping backwards down the hill. Daniel quickly started pulling again, but wasn't strong enough to start the train on the hill, and his wheels skidded helplessly. Slug put on his brakes, but the weight of the cars was still pushing him. Then he got an idea. He puffed forward, his wheels slipped, but he felt the cars slow against his weight. They reached the bottom of the hill, and Slug whistled a warning to the engine in the yard. Daniel put on his brakes, and with much screeching, they finally came to a stop. Slug was relieved. He had helped avoid a terrible accident, but he was now out of steam and wouldn't be able to push the train. Daniel was worn out too. His axles had overheated from slipping. The trainmaster quickly came to find out what had happened, and was very angry with him. "Your actions could have led to a disaster," he said. "While you're being repaired, I hope you'll think about what it means to be a responsible engine." Daniel promised that he would. Then the trainmaster turned to Slug. "You did very well," he said. "I'm proud of you. You can rest, and I'll find other engines to take this train." "Oh, please, sir," said Matthew and Huff. "May we take it? We may be slow, but we're more than strong enough to make it over the hill together." The trainmaster agreed, and the 2 big engines coupled up. Slug cheered them on as they thundered up the hill. They delivered the train late, but without problems. This made the others realize how hard-working and reliable the big engines were. They don't mind their names anymore. They're only glad to feel like a part of the railroad.
Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Strumming